another organisation that's played, as we've heard, has played a really fundamental and important role this year has been the Information Commissioner's Office. And I'm absolutely delighted that we have Elizabeth Denham with us today, who is also going to share her thoughts on 2020 with us. So Elizabeth, over to you.
Thanks very much to Tech UK for inviting me yet again to this wonderful summit. It's a real privilege. And as I was listening to Anthony and to the minister's remarks, I'm going to echo a lot of what they have said, but perhaps with a slightly different perspective. But as I was listening to Anthony talk about what he's reading about soil. Well, I'm not reading about soil, I'm reading about surveillance. And I'm thinking that maybe what we need is a Tech UK book club that comes out of this summit. But I just want to bring to the attention everyone who's listening today a novella that was written in 1909 by an Edwardian writer, E.M. Forster. And E.M. Forster is known for Passage to India. He's known for all these dramas about early 20th century manners. But he wrote a sci-fi book in 1909, which is called The Machine Stops. And that book is about a future society where the surface of the earth is no longer habitable. And so everybody lives in little pods under the earth, and they can only communicate with each other through the machine and through screens. And so isolation and loneliness sets in. And E.M. Forster in this novella, I think, even predicts the internet age. And everybody's lives are run by the machine, only people forget that they created the machine. And so there's this real disparity between what they want to do as humans and what they are as humans is no longer their control, it's the machine's control. So I think when I was reading this novel, it really hit home to me as I was in my London flat, isolated throughout 2020, and thinking about our dependency on technology to worship, to socialize, to work. And so I want to recommend that to all of you listening today. It's amazing. But I'm also going to look to Anthony to give me some reading recommendations on soil and climate change. That's a very long introduction to what I wanted to say, which is that none of us expected 2020 to go the way it has. But if I focus on the data aspects, I agree with the minister that we've seen an incredible acceleration in the take-up of digital services that would have otherwise have taken years. But this uptake isn't just about more people using video platforms to communicate with family or friends or do their work. We have seen a change in attitude. And we've seen the threat to public health prompt people to accept approaches that would have been unthinkable at the start of the year. But the other change in attitude is I've seen people demanding innovation in areas where it used to be organizations had previously been the ones pushing for change. And I'm thinking now of GP practices as an example, where 99% of GP offices now offer online consultations. And before this year began, it was only 10%. And it's an expectation that people can communicate this way. I've also seen a change in the attitude of organizations this year. And we know that data has been a central pillar, the main ingredient to the pandemic response. But I saw NHSX engaging with our office at the earliest possible stage when they were building the contact tracing app. So privacy was right at that stage, right at that consideration. And the ICO's data ethics advisor, Ellis Perry, who's talking later at the summit, he was deeply embedded and deeply involved in looking at the development of the contact tracing app. So in looking at all of us involved in data protection and data ethics, our work has never been broader and it's never been so complex. So if you take, for example, the report that the ICO published in the spring, we were looking at the police services extraction of data from the victims of sexual abuse mobile phones. So mobile phone extraction. And when we looked at this issue, it was about so much more than data protection. We had to come to a resolution that empathetically addressed a clash of rights. So the right of the accused to a fair trial, the right to privacy of the victim, criminal prosecution law, and the police relationship with the community. So our resolution in this report touched on stakeholders' competing rights across the criminal justice realm. And our resolution has been accepted by the police, by the victims community, by the prosecution service, and we're starting to see change. But today, what I wanted to do in my prepared remarks is run through 3 areas where I believe data ethics can help our community better respond to the challenges that we face. My first point is that data ethics can help us work together. And last year, I asked whether data ethics could form a common lexicon for discussions between privacy regulators around the globe. And the answer in 2020 is a resounding yes. 2020 saw greater international collaboration on privacy issues than we have ever seen. High stakes encouraged a shift of focus away from legislative and cultural differences and towards solving our common challenges. So the core aspects of data ethics, fairness, transparency, proportionality, were centered to those conversations. And I think in this community, we often talk about privacy being a team sport. But this year, it truly was. And by working together with other regulators, the ICO was able to produce clear, consistent, pragmatic guidance for organizations facing new and novel challenges in the use of data. So what I'm incredibly proud of at the ICO is through a very challenging year, we were able to produce some really practical tools. Our accountability framework, our AI work, and hot off the press today is the guidance on the use of data analytics in policing. It feels as though we saw this collaboration on the fundamental issues in the private sector too. We saw Google and Apple working together to collaborate on contact tracing APIs. And circling back to the data for good theme, we saw supermarkets and public authorities working together to help those who were shielding. The difficult work, the difficult policy questions have not yet finished, and data ethics, particularly asking whether an approach is fair and legal and transparent, will continue to be a lexicon for these shared discussions. The second area where data ethics can help is by encouraging a focus on the people who are affected by data decisions. Too often, I think most of us are thinking about accountability by considering the views of people in a very vague, abstract way. And when we do this, we shouldn't be surprised when our approach to personal data prompts such strong reactions. And like Anthony, I will use as an example the algorithm that was employed to inform A-level exam results. And I don't want to get into the who did what when it came to the algorithm used in this context, because the ICO's investigation is live. But let's focus on the lessons learned from a case that made algorithmic decision-making dinner time conversation in the UK. And what stands out to me is that if we want the benefits of organizations innovating with people's data, we need to make sure that people trust in how their data is used. So how do we achieve that kind of trust when a young adult's first significant experience with data-driven innovation is feeling discriminated against on their A-level results? Or when a young man's experience is seeing their name wrongly included in a gangs database passed between London authorities. So a lot of the digital innovation that we're talking about relies on personal data. And so it relies on the trust of individuals. So that must mean all individuals, not just those easier to reach communities. And we're already seeing progress in this area. Part of the work of the Ada Lovelace Institute has been about explaining complicated processing to those affected by that processing. And a shout out to the work that the CDEI is doing on bias against ethnic minorities in algorithmic decision making. Data ethics can help to ensure that we're all valuing people's views on how their data is treated. And I'm happy to see that there's a session later today that's led by Sue about consultation and whether the right voices are being heard. So how those views then inform decisions about data processing brings me to my third point, which is about the role of data ethics boards. And I know that some of you listening to my presentation are saying, yeah, been there, done that, tried that, it didn't work so well. But when it comes to data ethics boards, I think we need to be more creative if we are going to be able to answer those sticky questions that characterize modern data protection. So data ethics boards can be part of the solution if, and this is a critical if, they're run in the right way. And that means using those boards to inform compliance and challenge decisions. So ethics boards, I think, can give a depth to assessments of risks a project creates and also about the mitigations put in place. They can demonstrate the thought process behind the privacy by design decisions. So what I'm proposing is not a new requirement, because accountability has always been a central component to data protection compliance. But I think the value of data ethics boards grows as the breadth of data use grows. The complexity of data use and the public scrutiny now of data use needs data ethics reviews. So it is an area that I expect to see develop and become more precise in the coming years. And it's one where I see trade bodies like Tech UK being central. So I've spoken here briefly about 3 areas where data ethics can have a practical impact: as a lexicon for shared discussion, in encouraging consideration of people's views on data processing, and to inform accountability through data ethics boards. And the golden thread that runs through all of these areas is trust. So we've seen the benefits of data-driven innovation this year more than any other. And whether that's responding to a public health emergency or helping us stay in touch with our families. But that innovation relies on trust, and people have to trust when they provide their information that it's going to be treated legally, fairly, and transparently. So our community faces a big challenge in helping that to happen, especially as the questions that we're asked get more difficult and the stakes are higher. Thank you very much. I look forward to any time for questions.
Thank you so much, Liz. I think the Clash of Rights would be an excellent title for a book in itself. I just have one question about really, I suppose, what's the area where you would most like to see progress next year? What's the kind of the one thing where you feel it is most urgent for you?
The one thing that's keeping me up at night, Anthony, and where I'm focusing a lot of my thinking is again, let's go back to E.M. Forrester and talk about algorithmic decision making. So I think that's critically important, and I think we can build on a lot of the tools and a lot of the discussions and debate that we've had this year. And for the first time, with some of the investigations we're doing at the ICO, I think we'll get some answers around that. If I can add one more thing, in 2021, we will see the Kids Code, the ICO's Kids Code going live. And I think when it comes to children's privacy, that's going to have a big effect. So 2021 for me is all about the kids.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for joining us today. It really, you've been a constant supporter of this event over the years. I genuinely feel we've moved a long way from the first time we came together 4 years ago. And I think, huge credit to the ICO for all of the work that you've done in 4 incredibly challenging years. But not just on the privacy agenda, but much more broadly in terms of the way you've really supported the work on ethics. And I think it's been a real asset for the UK, the work the ICO has done. So thank you so much, and thank you again for joining us.